James. Everybody say James. James writing to the quote-unquote infant church. It was several years old, but understand that the church was scattered from Jerusalem, and persecution came, and people were scattered everywhere, and they suffered a lot of turmoil, a lot of trouble, and a lot of mix-ups. And so James was writing to the church, and he was writing in a practical, servant-oriented emphasis, not just attempting, but succeeding in bringing stability and foundation to the group. And like we said earlier, his focus was not on salvation. We talked about people getting saved. Well, if we have a revolving door of people getting saved and walking out the door, we've accomplished nothing. And when you look at the early church, they really had a revival. We read the book of Acts, what took place in the book of Acts, and all those things that happened, but we don't just stop there. The church continued to move and grow. And so James, when he was writing, was not necessarily focusing on salvation. He was focusing on our response to our salvation, and we call that our religion. I mentioned last week that his approach was by means of tests. And we talked about a few weeks ago, comparing ourselves, not amongst ourselves, because we're not supposed to do that. But we have to look at something to compare to. So James is writing about the Word of God. And so we compare ourselves to how we are lining up, not with the super saint of sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so, but we go back to the originator, the Word itself. How are we lining up with the Word? What does the Word say? And one thing I did notice that it seems like a lot of things that we're looking at in the book of James is repetitive. And I don't like being repetitive. I'm sure you don't like hearing the same thing all the time. Nobody does. But since James thought it was so important to repeat himself, there's something behind that. Something very, very important behind that. And so maybe we ought to look at all this in that manner. So if I'm repeating myself, I'm not attempting to. We're just going through the book of James. The test of faith we looked at, willing to work and trust through trials and temptations. And again, not because so-and-so did it, but because the Word says we can. The test of obedience, are we willing to be doers of the Word and not just hear what the Word says and do our own thing? The test of true religion and that response, a true response, are we willing and able to control ourselves and our responses, our tongue, our action, our conversation, all those things, and minister not just to our friends. It's easy to minister to your friends, but to those who can't respond or don't have the ability to pay back or give back to you, are we willing to minister to those people? And then last week, I believe it was, we looked at the test of brotherly love, treating everybody with the same respect. Just because I am friends with so-and-so doesn't mean I'm not friends with such and such. And, and we talk in a small church, we don't really have cliques. A large church has cliques in church, and people say, well, cliques are bad. It's not necessarily they're bad because, you get a church full of different professions. Truck drivers, it's natural for truck drivers to get together and talk about trucking. Bored everybody else, but truckers get excited. Nurses talk nurse talk or whatever it is. So, but those are not necessarily treating one person worse than the other. But the test of brotherly love is, am I willing to treat everybody the same? Tonight we're going to look at another test, and it's called the test of perfection. In James chapter 2, verse 10, for whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. For he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now, if thou commit no adultery, yet if you kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. So speak ye and do so, and so do, as they that shall be judged by the law of liberty. For he shall have judgment without mercy, that hath showed no mercy, and mercy rejoiceth against judgment. So again, James writing to the church of judging one another. And that is so easy to judge one another. It is so easy to look at somebody's life and say, yeah, they should be doing this, or they should be doing that. And so James is writing about judging one another, thus bringing on a test of how we do this. And that is a test of perfection. The only one who is properly able to condemn, able to judge, or determine somebody has erred is the one who is perfected in their field of vocation. It sounds like a lot, but I cannot judge somebody in how they hunt because I don't hunt, right? I can't, it doesn't make sense for me to go to your sister and say, this is how you should sew this together. I am the last person you want sewing something together but if you are a professional hunter, you have the ability to tell people what they're doing wrong. Okay, but really the only one who is able to judge us is the one who is perfect in all things. His name is Jesus. I cannot judge you. You cannot judge me. You're not walking in my shoes. I'm not walking in your shoes. I can help, I can guide, but I can't judge. It's not my place to judge anybody. James said there's a law, and although that law, the Old Testament was a schoolmaster, and that schoolmaster was designed to bring sin to light, it also brings judgment, because once you realize you're sinning, there's got to be judging, because why would the Lord show us we're sinners and just leave it there? And so the Old Testament, the law was a schoolmaster to show people that they're lacking in God. They're lacking in relationship. James said there's this law, and it's going to bring judgment if we use it to judge other people. In James chapter 2, verse 10, he said, for whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of everything. So I can tell Dave or somebody that they're doing this and you should be doing that. And meanwhile, I'm doing this over here. That means I'm just as guilty as so-and-so doing that, because I am not perfect. So that removes me from the plateau of being a judge. In John 13:34, Jesus said, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, and that you also love one another. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one toward another. Now, we've heard that. That's one of the repetitive scriptures that we've been looking at all the time. So Jesus said, I'm giving you a new commandment, or a new law, that we are to love one another as he loved us. And by this, people are going to know that you're my disciple, my follower. Romans chapter 13, verse 8 says, owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another has fulfilled the law. Now, if we want to fulfill the law of God, we don't do it by coming to church. We're fulfilling it by loving one another. Yes, that includes coming to church. So why is this new law, and we call it new, Jesus, gave it to us 2,000 years ago, so it's not really new, but to him and to the world then, it was a new law. So why is this important that it's actually become our judge? Because the world is, I don't know if you've noticed this, the world is full of hatred. And the world is full of ritualism, and the world is full of falsehood. But God is love. We know God is love. He's merciful. He's loving. He's full of kindness. He's long-suffering. He's meek. The opposite of what the world is. And by being God's people, now remember, he's writing to the church, and he's stabilizing the church. Now get that in your mind. He's establishing and stabilizing a church that has been going through turmoil, trouble, and hardship. And now he's saying, this is how we settle things down. We are God's people, and we represent him, and we are ambassadors to God. If the world cannot see the difference in us and the world, then what change is there for them to change their lives? Where's the opportunity for them to change? If they don't see a change in my lifestyle, what do they have? They've already got my lifestyle if I haven't changed. So what is there to draw them to the house of God? When I say church, I don't mean to service. I'm talking about to church in relationship with God. What is it about us that makes us different? It's not our clothes. It's not our apparel. It's none of those external things, but there's got to be something to cause those people to say, hey, I want what you have. If I can't show them, I can't lead them. If I can't lead them, they're not coming. We can pray until we're blue in the face, but if we can't lead them, they're not coming. So if they can't see a difference in us, then we are actually wasting our time. And I hate to be blunt like that, but that's so true. We're not perfect. Not one of us is perfect, but we are forgiven. And that's a key here. Now, notice what Jesus said in John 13:34. He said, love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. How did he love us? He loved us with forgiveness, without respect of persons. He loved us equally. It doesn't matter. And you know what I'm enjoying? I'm enjoying Blessing and Samuel in church. I'm enjoying Otis in church. The multicultural. We all come from different places in life and backgrounds and cultures and all that, but we come in one accord. And that's a beautiful thing. It's really a good thing, because Jesus, when he loved us, he didn't say, well, I love her more than him, or I love so-and-so, but I still love you, but. That's the way the world does it. It's easy. It's easy for us to find reasons for our failures. If there's something wrong in my life, I am so quick. I'll just use me, okay? And I'm sure you're the same. And if you're not, forgive me. It's easy to find reasons for our failures, our shortcomings. I had a hard life. You don't know the lifestyle I came out of. You don't know the way my parents treated me. You don't know the culture that I came out of. You don't know the country I was in. You know nothing. I didn't grow up in church. I had bad counsel. I wasn't able to have education. So I can't do things, and I'm not as qualified. And so I'm failing in what I'm doing because of, and we're so quick to find something. But when somebody else faults, they come short, they fail, we are quick not to find reason for it. James was saying that under the law, if we fail at just one point, we're guilty. And the Jews understood this, and they lived many, many years under strict laws, some good, some bad, some contradicting the other laws, some from God and some from men. But now we are not judged according to the strictness of the law. So I can't go back and say, well, I didn't grow up in church. I can't go back and say, because I had a bad relationship with my parents or something happened as a child. I can't use that anymore because we are not governed by that law anymore. And so we're not judged by the strictness of this law, but we're now judged by what we call the law, and James called this the law of liberty. Love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. There's nothing in that statement that says if you find reason to, or if there's not enough evidence, or if you think they're good. There's nothing in there about that. The new law is very straightforward, and you might want to call it strict and straight. Love one another as I have loved you. We sang that song. Mercy rewrote my life. I should have fallen. My soul should be cast down, but mercy rewrote my life. That's how we are to love one another. The word liberty, it means freedom. It means unrestrained, not a slave. Liberty to do or to omit doing things that have no relationship to salvation. In other words, I've got the liberty not to do something. I've got the liberty not to blame something. I've got the liberty, the freedom, if you would, the unrestrained. I'm not locked into my past anymore. But you know what we do? We lock into these things and we hold it like a crutch. And we walk with a cane called excuses and reasons and ideas and concepts that we hang on to because we're being judged by that. And it's going to come back to us. Liberty is living as we should, not as we please. Everybody in this room, everybody in this city has the opportunity to serve God. Everybody in this room, everybody in this city has the opportunity to flourish with God. Everybody in this room, everybody in this city has the opportunity to reach heights they never dreamed of if they want to. If they want to. And so we find reasons, we find excuses, and so we hang on. The old law was never designed to be a liberator. It was designed to expose. That's all it was, to expose. Now, when we come into the presence of God now, there's still a little bit of that law because we feel guilty. We feel conviction. And that's why we repent. That's why we first repented, and that's why we repent every single day. Because it shows us our faults, our failures, our messes that we all have. Because the Bible says if we say we have no sin, we lie. Hate to break it to you, but lying's a sin. Even white lies. So the old law was designed to show where man stood in his relationship with his God. It was to show man how far away from God he really is. Contrary to that law, the law of liberty tells us something different. It tells us how close we can come to Jesus, not because we have to, but because we want to. See, there's a difference. I don't have to serve him. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. I don't have to draw near to him. I want to. And I hate to burst anybody's bubble. If you don't want to, there's something wrong. Yeah. It's as simple. It's simple. The old law was the schoolmaster that said you have to do this. The new law says you don't have to. The new law now rewards when we accomplish the task because we want to. What's the reward? We're not, a little gold star in our life, and no, we're rewarded by growing in God. We're rewarded by drawing closer to God and sensing and feeling His Spirit, and we become more spiritual. That's our reward. Now the onus is on us and not on the law. See, the law said you have to do this, so the onus is to have a proper law that says you have to do it. And that's what happened in the Old Testament. They started making laws that broke other laws, and so all of a sudden we can't even live because we make one law, follow one law, and we're breaking another, and we're guilty of everything. And so now the onus is on the individual. Forget the law. If you don't want to serve God, that's fine and dandy. That's totally up to you. But you're going to be rewarded and you're going to be judged according to what you want. See, I can, if I want, I can walk with God, or I choose not to walk with God. That's not your job. That's my job for me. I can't make up your mind. I can't beg you. I can't coerce you. I can't grab you by the throat. I can't grab you by the ear and drag you. I can't do that. You have to have the want to and the desire. The old law no longer judges us. We can go back and say, there's the example set. We can go back and see what happened. We can go back and see how to overcome some things. That's the whole basis of the Old Testament. How did they overcome? Physical, real things that took place Amen. But now they relate to a spirit. Here's a humanistic problem. Everybody say humanistic. With not just in church, but with anything that we deal with. What happens after doing something for a lengthy period of time, including living for God, is that it becomes a ritual. You know, a couple weeks ago, when I took, last week, I guess, when we took Samuel, the bicycle, he had trouble riding. I'm not trying to embarrass him. He's never ridden a bicycle. And you know what came to my mind? Man, I'm glad it's him trying to ride it, not me. Because what we take for granted is just the things we did and we do all the time, and it becomes a ritual to us. It becomes like a symbol of something, because it's no longer, and in respect of church or living for God, you know, people, and I've said this many times, people walk into church and they can sense the presence of, they don't know what it is. They sense love, but it's really the presence of God. Now, do we feel that when we walk in? Or are we so, and I'm not judging with this, I'm just saying, because we get so accustomed to just coming, and it becomes, and I'm not saying we come to church as a ritual, so I'm not saying that at all, but it can become a ritual. If somebody is sitting, if you always sit in that seat where you're sitting now, and somebody's sitting in it, does that mess you up? Sure it does. You're seeing things at a different angle. You just don't feel comfortable. It takes a while to get used to going somewhere else. So you want to get out of my seat. Well, it's become a ritual. Right? And I'm not going to ask you to move seats, but maybe you should sometime. Sit a little bit closer and not further, closer. But anytime you do anything, even driving a car, have you ever driven a car and wondered, how did I get here? You just went into automatic mode. And we do that in church, don't we? And again, I don't mean in church. I mean serving God. It's just there. And we become like law, men and women waiting for somebody to make a mistake. Because here we are. We've been serving God for 800 years. And new people come in and we're watching them because we are so accustomed. And they make a mistake. And whammo. And because we want them to be like us. Because we are the elite now. We've been serving God for 300 years, did I say? We've been serving God for 300 years, so we are at this level. Anybody coming in and they make a mistake, why did that happen? The problem is we might be the elite, but we're not perfect. And we might be the elite, but if we're guilty in one thing, we're guilty of all. This happens in and it happens out of the church. We hear things. Back in my day, when I was younger, you know what we did in the church 20 years ago. It's not the same today. No, it's not the same. You have a different culture, different environment, different people, different society. Everything's different. Back when I came in, if somebody said to do this, you just did it. That was our generation. Now, look out. The generation is so different. We want them to come in like we did, don't we? Here's the law. You have to do this. You got to get rid of this. You got to get rid of that. And they come in saying, I need to understand. And we're applying our ritual of law to their ritual, or whatever you want to call it, of I need to understand. Because the society today is an educated, how would I put it? An educated people who have to understand before they respond. Right? So that's all there. And so it can't be the way we came in. And we say things like this younger generation. Doesn't that make you feel old? But I'm going to tell you about this younger generation. God is moving on this younger generation with revelation that was never given to this older generation. I'm going to tell you, they're smarter people. They're wiser people in their own way. They're educated. They have more at their disposal. We all know how computers, not how they work, but access some information. Well, we still struggle with that in our generation. But this younger generation, they can pull stuff up without even thinking now because they grew up like that. At 7 years old, they got a phone and they're reading on their phone, and we're trying to crack a book. Right? And I'm not saying to stay on your phones, but because it's a different period of time, a different generation, different society, in our head, if you're not perfect, something's wrong. You've got to change. You got to change. You got to change. They may not change the way you and I changed when we came in. There's a lot of people that are going to church that aren't changing quickly, but they're going deep. They're going deep. They're learning things that we never thought they'd learn. Instead of complaining about them, I said, instead of complaining about them, let's try praying for them. And I'm going to say another thing here. It's not just a generation. My life is different from your life. I said, my culture, my life, the way I do things is different from yours. And you can complain about me all you want, and I can complain about you all, but instead of complaining, pray. Instead of whispering in every ear, how about having a conversation with God and say, Lord, how are they doing? I'm going to pray for them because, Lord, they need prayer. You know what the difference is? Loving one another as Christ loved us. How many times has mercy touched your life that you know of? But how many times, and we think, oh, save me from an accident. No, you're breathing. You're serving God. You have the ability to hear the word of God and respond. That's mercy. That's mercy. You could have a twisted, wrecked heart and not serve God. Mercy rewrote your life. So how far does this law of liberty go? And the Bible, Bible asks questions and it always gives the answer. John chapter 8, verse 3, the scribes and Pharisees brought unto Jesus a woman taken in adultery. When they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. She was guilty. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what do you say? This they said, tempting him that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down with his finger, wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down, wrote on the ground, and they which heard it being convicted by their own conscience. They were convicted by what? Their own conscience. It wasn't this lady doing it. It wasn't her act doing it. It was her own conscience. Hey, wait a minute. I can't cast the first stone because I am guilty. I've sinned in my life. And they went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even to the last, and Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. And when Jesus lifted up himself, saw none but the woman, he said to her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath none condemned thee? And she said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. What would happen? Here's where the loving one another as Christ loved us. If one of us fell into sin tonight, we don't want that, but we would not want to come to church anymore because of embarrassment. Nobody would want us around because we made a mistake. And they're going to say, I saw that coming a mile away. You know the old, I know what they're thinking? Does anybody ever say that? I know what they're thinking. And I said this before, you don't know what people are thinking. And many times, sadly, you're right. They are thinking that. They should have known better. What's the matter with them anyways? They must have deserved that. What we've done is taken the law that was put under the blood 2,000 years ago, and we resurrected it again and applied it to the one that made the mistake. We also become like the scribes and Pharisees in that we administer what we deem as righteousness to slash the heart and soul of a wounded lamb. So where's the love in that? Where's the forgiveness in that? If somebody makes a mistake, and really that's what sin is. Most of the time, people do not willfully go out and sin. A lot of times they trip up, they fall, they mess up, they're tired, they're worn out, they're not praying, and you can find excuses, reasons, whatever. But if my brother or my sister is hurting, the last thing they need is an accuser. What they need is somebody to love them. Somebody to put their arms around. And without saying it, I know what you did, and I don't care. Heal the wounded heart. Jesus left the 99 sheep for one. Now, we can say, well, he did that. And what if you were the one? What if it was you that was the one? How many have been destroyed over quick judgment? Sometimes we are so pious and righteous, it stinks. Matthew 18:21, Peter came to Jesus and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? 7 times? And Jesus said, no, until 70 times 7. 490 times. Matthew 5:38, you heard that it's been said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I say unto you, that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. We want to strike back. And if somebody fails, we're striking back, aren't we? You did something, you shouldn't have done that. And they need help. How often does somebody have to do something to offend us before we turn them out of our lives? We turn our back on them. We ignore them. We disfellowship them. We don't want anything to do with them. We find fault. We desire to hurt them. Maybe not physically, but I'm hurting you if I cut myself off from you. They call for help and I can't. You're hurting them. When something goes against them, we say you deserve it instead of I'm going to pray for you. When you point your finger at somebody, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. You notice that? There's 3 fingers pointing right back. And so if you have not sinned, if you're perfect, point the finger. But look out, because many times you point fingers, it comes back to haunt you. The same thing that you pointed the finger at somebody over will come back. Here's the key of the church. God is awesome, isn't he? And he knows exactly what he's doing. He has placed people together in a group. You know why? To grow. To draw strength from one another. To help one another. That can't be done if I don't first love my brother and my sister. If we expect everybody to be perfect like I am, and I'm not talking about me, be perfect like yours truly, then nobody, while in bodily form, is able to be perfect, then we'll all fail. Because we all come short of the glory of God. We all have our good days and we all have our bad days. According to Paul, you read Corinthians chapter 13, and he's talking about charity or love. And love endures suffering, kind, and the list goes on and on. Now remember, James is writing this as a test. He's writing to a scrambled church, test of obedience and test of faith and the others. And now he's saying, here's a test of perfection. How close are you to perfection? How close are you to that ideal situation? And here's the key. Here's another key. Jesus said the world is going to know that you're my disciples, not by your preaching and doctrine, but by the love you have one towards another. If you hate me, you're hiding it, but the world will see it. If I hate you, Dave, and I don't, it sounds like I do because I'm picking on you all the time. But I love Dave, and you know that, right? Because you can feel that. I tease him, you can feel the love. But if I hated Dave, then Dave may or may not feel it. I might hide it, but others are going to sense it. They're going to pick up on it. So Jesus said they're going to know you're my followers by the love you have one to another. And back to James chapter 2, verse 12, he says, so speak ye and also do, not talk, but do, as they that shall be judged by the law of liberty. Now, remember that law in the Old Testament that judged? Now we're going to be judged by the law of liberty. The old law killed, the new law becomes an assistant or a helper. I'm in your shoes. Like you, I fail. Like, I won't use Dave. Tired of Dave being picked on. But just like anybody else, I fail. And when I understand I fail, I may not understand how you failed, but I understand you failed. And I understand I'm capable of falling. So I'm here to help. It may not be the same failure that I have, but in my strength, I can help you. Why? Because I love you. I love you. I'm here for you. And if we judge without mercy, now here's the key again. If we judge without mercy, verse 13 tells us, we're going to be judged without mercy. It's going to come back. It's all going to swing back. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. If I don't use mercy in my judging, then I'm going to be judged without that mercy. And forgive me, folks, I need the mercy of God. I may not fall like you fell, or you might not fall like I fell. But there's another area where mercy's got to pick you up and pick me up. But if I don't use that mercy towards you, then it's not going to come back to me. I don't know about you, but judgment to me is not a happy time. It's a doomed connotation. But mercy rises above that doom. We sang the song, Mercy Rewrote My Life. I should have fallen, my soul cast down. But mercy rewrote my life. And so like Jesus said, let him without sin cast the first stone. In Romans chapter 6:15, what then? Shall we sin because we're not under the law, but under grace? God forbid. Know ye not that to whom you yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants you are to whom you obey, whether of sin unto death or of obedience unto righteousness. So in other words, where am I going to follow? Who am I a servant? I'm going to be a servant to somebody, right? I'm going to be a servant to sin. I'm going to be a servant to mercy. I'm going to be a servant to God. I'm going to be a servant to somebody. And again, the law of liberty says, I choose. The law of liberty says, I want to follow after this. I'm a servant to somebody, but now I choose who I'm a servant to. I can serve myself in my own wacky ways. I can serve myself. In my excuses, in my reasoning, in my everything I look at, or else I can let that stuff go and let God have his way. James chapter 4:17, I'm jumping ahead a couple chapters just for one verse. Therefore, to him that knows to do good, and he doesn't do it, to him. That's sin. Again, James is writing to the church here. The world doesn't know this stuff. So they're not held accountable. We know this stuff. So we're going to be held accountable. If I want mercy in my life, I had better show you mercy first. Because I need mercy to rewrite my life. Let's stand.